You want answers?
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
You want answers?
You have offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth.
And you have offended a Shaolin temple.
You can't handle the truth.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant.
As I mentioned earlier today, I got this great paper forwarded to me by my friend Paul Armentano out at Normal, and it's coming from the Journal of Frontiers in Psychiatry, and Jonathan Calkins is one of the authors on the paper, and basically they're investigating a question that's kind of an inside baseball thing as far as statistics and research on epidemiological causes of drug abuse and so forth. And that is the question of how we measure drug use in this country. How exactly do we try to predict what's going to happen if we legalize and what sort of policy is going to affect the drug using population? And the authors of this study point out that there's kind of a issue with just merely looking at how many people use drugs and not paying attention to how much of the drugs they are using. So this plays into this report where they were taking a look at different matrices by which they might measure marijuana use in this country. And it was a very interesting report. But as I dug into the report, I find that a lot of the data they reveal through the use of these new measurements is even better news for those of us who've been pointing out how marijuana legalization benefits our society rather than harms it. Now, you know that one of the primary fear cards that the prohibitionists still have to delay the inevitable re-legalization of cannabis is something we've called WOTC. You know, like Yahtzee, right? WOTC. But that's an acronym, and it stands for What About the Children? WOTC. And the inference, of course, is that legalizing marijuana would expose children to more danger. You know, the more danger than the current system of unlicensed dealers who don't check IDs. Right? That somehow we put in the store behind the counter and check ID. Oh my God. Terrible things will happen to the kids. You know, next thing you know, we're going to have a nation full of red-eyed teenagers dropping out of school, roaming the streets like pot zombies in search of strains. But this new paper that was just published in this journal examines marijuana use, and it's taking a look at information from 2002 to 2011. And it kind of gives lie to this hypothesis that if we increase access to marijuana, it's going to doom American teenagers. In fact, what we find is the truth here is that people that are eligible for AARP, you know, people aged 50 and older, are the ones who are driving the recent popularity of weed. Now, the authors are working on this idea that measuring how many people smoke pot is not always the best indicator of pot use. Yeah, sure, there's probably more once-a-month tokers in the Big Chill than there are daily stoners in the Big Lebowski. But the dude's gonna smoke more in 1 hour than all those old college pals smoking a reunion spliff on a weekend. By crunching the numbers from the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, the authors calculated a figure called use days. It's a figure that represents how often and how much one tokes. And it was interesting how they explained it too. They said, rather than thinking of it as a survey where you find marijuana smokers and ask them what they're smoking, it's as if you found every gram of marijuana and asked those grams who smoked them. If you want to think of it that way, it's a nice, interesting way of turning it around. It's a way of looking at the consumption of marijuana and then tying the consumption to the people who are consuming it, rather than just looking at how many people are consuming it. So as they did these figures, they took a look at some, of the demographics of age groups and races and educational level. And instead of looking at through the filter of how many people are using, which, we all have seen the bell curve where, it's 18 to 22 to 23-year-olds, are most of the pot smokers. And then older people, the curve, flattens out for older folks. But instead of looking at how many people are smoking, it's a look at how often and how much they're smoking. And so here's some of the stuff that they found out. They found out that from 2002 to 2007, use of cannabis remained fairly steady among all groups based on how often they used. That is, we look at what they call past year tokers. That's people who admit that they have smoked pot within the past year, maybe just once even. Versus past month tokers. Actually, they call it past 30 days tokers, but we'll just call it past month tokers, right? Same idea. Have you smoked pot this month? And they looked at near daily tokers. And what they define as near daily, because in the national survey, they ask, did you smoke pot this month? And then they'll ask how many days this month, or how many days in the past 30 days have you smoked pot? And so based on those numbers, they're counting near daily tokers as 21 days or more in a 30-day period. And I think that's fairly reasonable. That's 3 weeks out of 4. That's going without maybe a day or two each week. Okay, so we're talking near daily tokers. All three of those groups from 2002 to 2007, their use remained relatively stable. There may have been more of them, but the population increased as well. You get my point, right? So the proportion of them to the population stayed relatively the same. But then in 2007, all the groups began to see an increase, but the most marked increase was the near daily tokers, who are now a nearly 60% greater population than 2002. That is to say, people who are frequent cannabis consumers, that market has grown faster than the market of people who are monthly or annual cannabis consumers. However, based on use days, if you look at it the way these authors are looking at it, a near daily toker can consume as much as 40 times more than a once a month toker. So it's us near daily tokers that drive the market. We're the important ones. We are the ones the marketers are going to look at because it's us near daily tokers that are consuming the most marijuana. But here's the kicker. That 60% increase in near daily tokers isn't coming from the ranks of high schools and colleges. It's coming from baby boomers and retirees. As the paper notes, quote, in 2002, there were more than 3 times as many youth, 12 to 17, as older adults, age 50 and older, using cannabis on a daily or near daily basis. More than 3 times as many youth as older adults. In 2011, there are more than 2.5 times more older adults than youth using on a daily or near daily basis. We've just about flipped that ratio of teenagers versus 50 and older. Yeah, we do have the baby boomer demographic bubble, right? I mean, there's just more older people compared to younger people, period, because that demographic bubble, getting older and older. But there's an increasingly greater ratio of older to young adults in cannabis that outpaces that baby boom growth. So the authors conclude, quote, this suggests an increase in heavy cannabis use among older individuals, end quote. Here's another way to look at these figures. In 2002, teens, and again, when we say teens, we're going to say 12 to 17. I know 12 is not a teenager, but ask a parent of a 12-year-old. In 2002, teens made up 13% of near daily users. That's over 1 out of 8 near daily users was a teenager. In 2011, the figure is 7%. That's less than 1 out of 12. For young adults, aged 18 to 21, college age, right? The figures dropped from 26% to 21%. But for adults aged 22 and older, near daily use rose from 62% to 73%. So what we are seeing here is the near daily use of cannabis is increasingly become something more older folks are doing and fewer younger folks are doing. And add this to the mix, in the 2002 and 2003 national surveys of daily use and health, they didn't include blunt use. And of course, we know blunts are more likely to be used by young adults and teenagers. So those figures from 2002 through 2003 would probably be greater than the 13% that we had before. And what we've got now would be an even greater reduction in the youth use. And this is over the period when the number of medical marijuana states, this is from 2002 to 2011, this is over a period when the number of medical marijuana states went from 7 to 15, and dispensary access to medical marijuana exploded in 2007. That's when the graphs really take off, is once adults can get safe access in a dispensary. That's when it started to take off. During all that period, what we found, the average age of a near daily marijuana smoker went up, and use by people 21 and under went down. Now, here's some other interesting findings in this study. It's a man's world. Males make up 60% of past year tokers, 64% of past month tokers, and 70% of past month weed buyers. So ladies, if you're looking for a fella, consider taking up weed. Marijuana por fumar. Hispanics are making up a greater share. They've gone from 8% to 14% of near daily tokers. And that's outpacing the overall demographic growth of Hispanics in general. White folks like me went from 3 out of 4 in 2002 to just 2 out of 3 in 2011 of the daily tokers. So, bienvenidos! Welcome to the near daily tokers. It's also the smarter choice. Here's a great quote from this paper. The largest relative increase was among those with a college degree, whose use days increased by 72% from 2002 to 2011. Smarter folks are realizing that smoking weed instead of taking those pills or drinking that whiskey is a great way to relax. We also find in this report that the more you toke makes a difference in how much you toke. That once a month Big Chill toker uses about 0.6 grams on that one day that he tokes. That once a day Big Lebowski toker will use about 2.75 grams a day. So based on weight consumed in just 1 month, it takes almost 140 chills to equal 1 Lebowski. Those are my new measurements, by the way. We're going to call the annual toker Big Chillers and the daily tokers Big Lebowskis. I think that's fair. So from what I can tell from this paper, it would appear that the cannabis connoisseurs, those of us who drive the market, those of us who make up almost more than 60% of the market in cannabis by weight, are currently becoming older, better educated, and more diverse. And I should say, the dude abides. All right, that's all the time we got here for Hour 1, the Russ Belville Show. Remember, you can pick us up on Spreaker.com as well as Stitcher. We're on Ustream, YouTube, TuneIn, and soon to be, I hope, on iHeartRadio. We've submitted our application. It's still pending. But I want to thank to all our over 106 followers out there who made it possible for us to submit the application. You can also find our podcasts available at 420radio.org, and if you become a VIP member, you'll find more podcasts that aren't available to the general public. Just sign up there under the donate button and become a VIP member today. That's all we got for this first hour. For Brian the Red, I'm Radical Russ. Join us for Hour 2. Toker Talk Radio is coming up next with my appearance with Ganja John on the Ed Foreman Show. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down.